communities and the delivery of trauma care itself across the African continent. Keep in mind that these aren't just injuries from wars. Thank you. They're consequences of systems and communities under strain. From under-resourced populations to overwhelmed hospitals, each case represents a challenge to how we define and deliver orthopedic trauma care. With that in mind, I'm excited to introduce Dr. Headings, who will help us unpack what conflict-related trauma really looks like on the ground. All right, Dr. Headings.
Thanks so much, Annie. And thanks everybody for coming. Let's see, it looks like Dr. Fabrus just joined. So we have Dr. Fabrus, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So we have a great panel today. So we have Dr. Fabrus from Madagascar, Dr. Abebe from Ethiopia, Dr. Betty Casa from Ethiopia, Dr. Beza Garif from Ethiopia, one of our former fellows. And let's see if our Zambian team made it on. It doesn't look like it, but our Zambian team may be joining us. If you're there and I'm overlooking you, let me know. Oh, there you are, Patrick. Patrick, are you there, Dr. Kenda?
I'm here.
Okay, great, great. So we have a team of healthcare providers from around the world, specifically in Africa, and we're just going to talk about why does conflict-related trauma, make such a large part of this trauma epidemic? Why does it occur? Now, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Blood Diamonds, but I feel like this is illustrated very good in this movie. So I'm going to just play a clip from this. Sorry. Let me get this. Try that again. I was playing it twice. I apologize. Okay, kind of an intense beginning, but we're talking about conflict-related violence. We want to understand the etiology of it. And, what is it we can do as an American university to impact it? It's a very complex issue. But we're going to talk about some principles for today that I hope this lecture will touch upon and that will help you impact your community, as well as, if you get involved in this project, hopefully minimize the effects of trauma in Africa. Number one, diversity is our strength. Only if certain conditions are met. It's kind of a hot button topic today, in terms of diversity, but diversity can be a strength or it can be a weakness. And we'll kind of explore why that is. And then the second is sometimes, and this is something that you can take from this lecture and apply to your practice, whether you do orthopedic trauma or not. And sometimes, do you need something? Oh, what's going on? Oh, what do you got to do? Alexa's going to fix the slides, but that was great. You crawled in there so well. Thank you so much. Okay, you can come out this way or do that. Okay, so sometimes, thank you for doing that. Okay, sometimes healthcare providers need to make their community aware that a problem exists. And what am I talking about? Sometimes, there may be some time in your career that you witness something that you need to sound the alarm about. So there's some good examples of that. If you saw my notes up there, Dr. Michael Gottlieb, he was a physician who reported a cluster of diseases in Los Angeles that eventually led to the discovery of the HIV virus. But he recognized this cluster of diseases that were occurring in gay men. And him and some other colleagues described this, and that launched this, kind of look into what's causing this, and that's how HIV was discovered. And then more recently, I think you all remember, there was a Dr. Lai, who was an ophthalmologist, who sounded the alarm about COVID-19 in China. Now, he was reprimanded for that, but he witnessed something that was occurring, and he brought attention to it. So why am I saying that in the context of conflict-related trauma? You'll see that as we go through this. But similar, so we're going to go through the etiology of this, and similar to a lot of the minutiae you learn regarding the pathology of certain conditions, the information you learn today can have direct application to how you conduct yourself civically to minimize violence or conflict. You can take this and you can apply this civically. Whether you like it or not, if you get into any type of medicine that treats trauma, people are going to look for you as a leader in that field, and to kind of take the lead in terms of things to minimize trauma. It's just a position you're going to find yourself in. So before we go, further into this, we need to understand the types of conflict that there are. Now, there's state-based conflicts, and those are basically, you can think of civil conflicts where at least one of the actors involved is a state. Non-state conflicts, these are conflicts that can occur between ethnic groups or different political groups. And then there's one-sided violence. This can involve a state or not, where you've got one group attacking another group. And then battle-related deaths. What are those? How are those calculated? Why does that matter, in terms of how we calculate deaths? Well, here's why. Because I think you'll find, as you look into this, the number of deaths that occur due to conflict-related issues are underreported. If you look at the global burden of disease studies, the way they get their numbers is they'll actually go into the government or the health services of these nations, and they'll say how many people died of conflict. And some of the nations that we'll talk about today, or that are involved in Africa, they report to the global burden of disease that they lost 30,000 people due to conflict-related violence. Yet if you look at other numbers that are put out by UN agencies and inspectors in these areas where there's been conflict, the numbers are as high as 600,000 to 1 million. But what country wants to report the fatalities from their one-sided violence against a certain ethnic group? Do you think they're going to honestly report that? Who sounds the alarm about that? And who sees that? Well, who sees it is a physician who's treating those people who are dying. So whether you like it or not, you may find yourself in a position where you need to make people aware, your community aware, the world aware that there's a problem and that something needs to be done about it. if you just look at a map of Africa where most of these state-based conflicts, that's in blue, non-state conflicts, that's in light green, or one-sided violence occurs, which is kind of in orange, you can see it's kind of all in this similar region in Africa where there's a lot of instability. And we'll talk about why that exists. What is it that contributes to that? But I think what we'll do at this point is just bring in our panel. And maybe we'll start out with our team from Ethiopia, then we'll go to Zambia, and then we'll go to Madagascar. So what type of conflicts, Dr. Beza, do you see in Ethiopia? State, non-state, one-sided, what makes up the most of it?
Hello, everyone. So in Ethiopia, I can say all kinds of conflicts are there, states-based, non-state conflicts, and also one-sided violences were reported. State-based conflicts since 2020 up to now in different regions of Ethiopia, there are reports of war going on and civil unrest, and also there are reports that there are one-sided violence in Ethiopia. So all kinds of violences are and conflicts are there. That's all I can say.
Okay, and I know please understand Dr. Beza is talking from Ethiopia, and it's kind of a sensitive position for him to be talking. Betty, Dr. Abebe, did you want to add anything to that regarding what types of conflict you see in Ethiopia?
Hi, everybody. This is Betty. Regarding what kind of conflicts we see in Ethiopia, up until recently, we do have civil unrest and civil war in some areas of the country. There's also issues with whenever there are like these areas with civil unrest, there are a lot of people who get gun violence, who are like exposed to gun violence, who are exposed, but more importantly, I feel like women and children are right in the middle of this problem, and they are the ones that experience the largest amounts of violence in the area. There's a lot of women who get sexually assaulted, children who get sexually assaulted, and lots of other things that come with decreased healthcare in the area where people could not get enough healthcare provisions, and issues like simply treatable medical conditions getting worse are other problems that we do see in conflict related incidents in zones like that. And there are also issues with like people developing PTSD, having anxiety issues, and long-term adjustment problems because of this trauma that they witness and they do experience in the area.
Dr. Abebe.
Maybe just to add to that, I think it's a heterogeneous problem. I would say there is a state-run. There have been a state-run war the last 5 years, if not longer. Unfortunately, it started a state-based war, but this actually percolates and encapsulates many other microcosms where there will be conflict between regions, so to speak. So there is Somali region, there is Afar region, there is Amhara region, there is Tigray region. Most of you are aware of the Tigray War, which was primarily the war between the state government and the Tigray People Liberation Front, or so to speak, Tigray region. But then there is war between the Somali region and the Oromia region, primarily based on land. So you could see, when you have unstable government because of a lot of different conflicts, it changes from a state-run war to a non-state war. And there is other party players, if you will, a little bit political to say. As you know, there is Nile River, which is the main river that runs into Egypt and eventually to Mediterranean, and the big dam was built, and it's been contentious for forever, and there is always, it's being duped as a war being waged by neighbors, i.e., Egypt, Sudan, and so forth. So whoever you talk to, everybody has their own, explanation and definition of what kind of war it is. But I can tell you, it is multi-faceted, so to speak.
Dr. Kinda, what type of wars or conflicts are you seeing in Zambia or in the region, the Congo around there? What are you seeing?
Okay, I'm going to speak representing Rwanda and Congo, but I will more focus on Congo because that's a place we find most of the conflict than Zambia, sorry. Here we find all the type of conflict as they're statuted here. Means conflict in Congo with a more political conflict. And as I say, political, these are conflicts over political power and can be manifest in the form of coup d'etat, conflict between political parties, personalities, and supporters, conflicts between traditional and formal authority. Apart from political conflict, there's also identity conflict, which here we talk about ethnicity and the spatial identifications. These are one of this conflict, type of conflict, it was actually generated as, it's a legacy from the colonial period, and identity has become politicized in many cases. And where we find some identities are privileged and others marginalized. And we have also some resource-based conflict. And this in my country for the past 30 years. For the past 30 years, this has been linked to the majority of intrastate and interstate conflict. Apart from this resource-based, we have also the civil unrest. And this referred like to protest, riot, revolts, and whatever. And I think those are the main conflict we find. I mean, civil unrest, resource-based conflict, identity conflict, and most political conflict.
Patrick, you gave my lecture. It's so good when you talk about the complexity of what drives conflict, particularly on the resource-based that you were talking about. And then the difference in ethnicities where you've got the haves and the have-nots. It sounds like you're saying. You have some ethnicities that have privilege and you have others that don't. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. And that drives conflict. That's one thing you'll see when we talk about diversity as our strength. Diversity can be a strength if there's equality. But if there's not equality, it can drive a wedge between groups. So that's great. And then Dr. Fabrice from Madagascar, right now you're undergoing, you just lost your president, a military coup took effect. Talk to us about conflict in Madagascar.
For Madagascar?
Yes.
Yes. For Madagascar, it's some of it is the same like the other most of the African country, but we have some diversity from the others because we are in an island. We kind of don't have like a shared border like the most of the African country, like Zambia and Ethiopia, but we still do have a lot of conflict, like internal conflict that drive from many different, like just now we are experiencing the unrest from, it's not a civil war, but it's protest from like the people because of more like because of just lack of water and electricity. So that drive a lot of problem, but the main issue is because of the poverty is there, and also like the corruption. So in most of the region, as we are in our back story, we are colonized by French, and that's have a big, huge impact because we are kind of literally free from the colonialism, but practically it's still there. It's like they are controlling almost everything and empowering it through like a corruption. And there are some places in Madagascar, as I say, it's not, it's like, it can be like it's a non-state, but people like fighting because like they are used, those people like give them like a gun to attack other villages. And that's lead to a big conflict in, especially like in the south of the country, but also in like most of the country, as this conflict because of the opposition and the youth. So there is a lot of trauma, but all this problem is mainly drive because of the lack of so many things in the country. Like we don't have infrastructure, we don't have like most of our infrastructure is built during the colonialism time. So it's not helping people anymore. So even if it's not like a state-based, like a war between like other country in the border, but we still have a lot of issue. And I saw it is even more than the conflict that like between a country, because the poverty it's like permanent. It's there all the year. So I think this is one of the big issue like here in Madagascar.
Thank you, Dr. Fabrice. So we're going to talk a little bit about predictive models of civil war, because I think these help us understand what drives conflict. You know, what is it that makes one group want to fight another group, and, you know, to the point that they want to kill that other group? Why is that? You know, and so this is a good article that you can just pull off the web, this Ibrahim El-Badawi and the Nicholas Sambanis, where they came up with these predictive models looking at 161 countries in Africa between 1960 and 1999. And they developed these models on predicting what type of environments would bring about civil war. It's really interesting. It focused on 4 key factors: social fractionalization, political rights, living standards, and economic diversification. This is what they looked at. So to start off with, let's look at social fractionalization. And let's talk about ethno-linguistic diversity in Africa. And if you look at Africa, there's like 2,058 spoken language in Africa. It's about 30% of the world's total 6,809 living languages. So while Africa holds 13% of the world's population, 1 out of every three languages used in the world is an African language. And the average number of speakers for a language in Africa is approximately 400,000. Every African country would average between 40 or 50 languages spoken in its territory. And while the rest of the world averages 3.2 to 4.7 ethnic groups per country, African countries have an average greater than 8 each. And they account for about 43% of the world's ethnic groups. And then to compound this, the colonization of Africa by European powers in the 19th century created political units that divided ethnic groups, and in some cases, even combined rival groups within certain countries. And so the thought was this is the knee-jerk reaction that the rest of the world had to conflict in Africa. You got a lot of ethno-linguistic diversity. Because you have all this diversity, they just don't get along and they fight. Is it that simple? And when you look at this really critically, that's not it. You'll see there's more involved here. But let's just ask. Let's start off with Dr. Kinda. How much diversity exists in Zambia? How much diversity, ethnic and linguistic, exists in the Congo? What do you have there?
Okay, in Zambia, we have over 70 ethnologic groups. And while in Congo, it's over 400.
Wow. How about Ethiopia?
In Ethiopia, I think there are around 80 different languages, and the different ethnic groups might even be more than that. There hasn't been a study that actually confirmed how many there are. If there are any recent data, please, everyone else, correct me.
Do you agree, Dr. Bebe?
That's correct.
Dr. Fabrice, how about Madagascar?
In Madagascar, yeah, we don't have much like most of the other African country. We have about 19 languages, but the good of it is we can still understand each other. As we are an island, we are so kind of unique.
So here's just a predictive model from that paper that I showed you. And what it looks at is it looks at polity. And what is polity? Polity is how strong is our government, and is everyone represented, and does everyone have a voice, right? So the extreme of this would be an autocracy, where you have basically somebody in charge, nobody has a voice but the king or the dictator. And then on the other side of this, you have a very well-functioning democracy where everybody gets a voice at the table. And if people don't like how things are going, they can make a change. And so if you look here, what they looked at is your probability of war over here. And then they looked at ethno-linguistic fractionalization. So here at 0, everybody's basically the same ethnicity. They're the same language. And what you do find, in those cultures is it's really hard to, even if you have a king, everybody seems to be on the same sheet of music. It's hard to produce conflict. And see, if you have the circle here, this parabola right there, that's the bottom 10% of polity. So you have very little representation. And here's what's interesting. Look at this. When you get all the way over and you've got a tremendous amount of diversity, even though you have little voice at the table, because there's so much diversity, it's hard for all those people to come together and create a conflict or challenge the government. Isn't that interesting? So a lot of diversity can be protective for a dictator. And where you get your biggest risk of war is when you get to about 40 to 60%, when you have basically two main groups, both with opposing views, but the other group that's maybe at 40% doesn't feel like it's represented. That's called a polarized society. We're kind of experiencing that in America. It's kind of scary. And that's where you get your highest risk for civil conflict. But look, if you look down here, look at this triangle here, right here, top 10% polity. Look what you do with your risk when everybody's represented. When they looked at these, 160 nations from 1960 to like 2000, when everybody feels like they have a voice at the table and they're represented, what's the chance of civil conflict? It's low. So it shows you how the strength of government and representation in government and people having a voice matters. It's not just about, ethno-linguistic diversity. It's not that diversity drives conflict. It's not that simple. And if you look at autocracy and instability in Africa, here's what you'll see. Here's a map. And this map shows where you have democracy in green. A democratizer is a country that's kind of shifting into democracy. And you have semi-authoritarian governments and you have autocratic governments. And if you just look at the share of African countries in conflict by regime type, look who has the conflicts. Who has the conflicts are the autocracies, where people don't have a voice, right? If you look at, what was this? 7 of the 9 autocracies facing armed conflict have leaders who've come to power by a coup or prolonged term in office by evading term limits. The people there don't have a voice. 3/4 of the African countries facing armed conflict, 12 out of 16, have either autocratic or semi-authoritarian governments. And of the 12 armed conflicts with authoritarian leading governments, 8 are political conflicts or civil wars. And then finally, the 4 democratizing governments that are experiencing armed conflict are all facing militant Islamist insurgencies. So it's a threat from without, not from within. So it shows the power of democracy and representation. Let's just take, a poll from our panel. Dr. Beza, Dr. Betty, Dr. Abebe, what do you think about democratization? What do you think about its influence when people have a voice in Ethiopia? Is this something Ethiopians are looking for? Do you think this can mitigate conflict? What are your thoughts on that?
It's kind of funny because all my life, all I've seen is everybody talking about democracy. When I was very, very young, when I was born, Ethiopia was being led by Haile Selassie. I don't know if many of you know this, but he was supposedly the king of Ethiopia, and it's more of he was the power. He held the power, and there were farmers, and I think mainly the university students kind of had an uprising, and he was deposed, and it was hijacked by the military. So there was no democracy for 17 years. There was civil war going on for that period of time. Then a coalition of group, including like in war between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Eritrea was became an independent state or country, that is, and Ethiopia was led by EPRDF, relatively stable in general from a standpoint of like crazy war and stuff. It was duped as being democratic, but you could see that there was overrepresentation of the region felt by many, and there was discontent on some groups, and either way, eventually, after 25 years, they gave way to the current regime, rather. And the last 7 years, it started real well. Everybody was so hopeful that democracy was going to be there, but then war broke out between the government and the Tigray region. Shall I say?
Dr. Beza, Betty, any comments?
Oh, so our country, in my country, is our federalism is based on ethnic federalism, which means the states are basically formed in terms of the ethnic group, the majority of ethnic group that live in that state. So the problem is because even if you are not in the from the ethnic group and live in the state of a different ethnic group, you're not going to be represented, because the federalism is based on ethnic federalism, and this always creates a problem. Like this will create ethnic violence and interregional disputes. And
Dr. Beza, didn't you say on your ID card that your ethnic group is on your ID card?
Yes, that's correct. And so you can be identified easily and targeted. And that is the main concern, because that's if you read about the war in Rwanda and the civil war, it was because one of the things that causes a large amount of people genocide is like because their ethnicity was documented on their ID. That helped the two major groups in the Rwanda. All those killing is because of this thing, and we have it in my country right now. So it is like, it's very dangerous. Everyone knows it's dangerous, but it's put on purpose, you know. And so the government or whatever the politicians who are leading, which can target you so easily. And the democratization, we have like very limited democratization, limited central control, weak rule of law, and we have also restricted media. So you cannot hear anything come out from Ethiopia because of these things. So there are lack of transparency and inclusivity. So it's very dangerous political system that we are following. And we have, just like Dr. Abebe said, we have been in a war. I mean, since I can remember. So there's always been war in Ethiopia because of this thing.
Now, everybody take note of this. So look at the map, and you see Ethiopia is a semi-authoritarian country on the map. So just take note of that. Now let's go to Dr. Kinda. Dr. Kinda, you're in Zambia, and that's considered a democratizer nation. Would you consider Zambia a peaceful nation?
Okay, Zambia in general is a peaceful nation because here, in terms of conflicts, okay, first talking about war, we don't have conflict related to war. Now, here, most of the conflict I've experienced here, they are quite connected to the elections. Okay, because even though we have democratic institution here like elections, but the process is okay, means there's widespread of corruption, and there's this lack of rule of law. There's I think the media is not as free as they can say here. And this now, and during election, that's where you can find that there's some riot, there's violence in between. This happen usually in between people belonging to different political party. That's what happened exactly in Zambia. While in Congo, it's actually very low. Also, we have also elections in Congo, but there's too much corruption because people they don't believe in what comes out of the elections, and
Yeah.
usually elections also are grouped in ethnicity, definitely, because people they vote like they are more they vote because this one belongs to the tribe, belong to the province, and even when there's a candidate who has got a very good plan and everything, but as long as it belong to this ethnic, belongs to this clan, they will never vote him because that's the main is that I and that even caused that violent, that conflict come after election is just it's more on the clan, on the tribe, and and even in Zambia actually is the same, that conflict, because people they vote according to the clan, they vote according to the tribe. That's what I can say.
Dr. Fabrice, Madagascar, I mean, it's changed. This map's out of date now. It sounds like you have an autocracy now. Would that be correct? It's military control. We may have. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on just for the sake of time. So, well, let's look at income level and poverty. How much does that affect conflict? If you have a lot of young men and they're very poor and they need to make money, and then you have somebody coming in that's willing to give them a job to pay them just to incite civil unrest or to fight, you know, that's a great opportunity for somebody who wants to topple the government. A lot of the civil conflicts that exist in these nations, because you have other powers outside of Africa that want their resources, and if the government that's currently in control isn't friendly to, you know, a nation that wants those resources, they'd be happy to topple it. So if you have poverty, it gives you this advantage to incite a civil war. You can hire fighters. And you know what they looked at here in this was they looked at the circle represents the bottom 10% of gross domestic product, and then the triangle, the top. But you'll see it's really interesting. Economics does not have as big an effect on civil unrest as political representation. You see, it still does. If people have the things they need, they're less likely to fight. But you'll see it's not as flat. It's not as flat in effect as if you have good political representation. And this just shows, this is a World Bank map. And it's really good. If you look at this, the World Bank has a time lapse on this, and it shows what it's like from the 1980s in the world to present. But this is 2024, and this shows where you have the low-income countries in the world. Look where the low-income countries in the world are at currently. They are, they're primarily in Africa, right? The purple is low income. There's just few. They're outside of Africa. So you can see from this model that poverty does influence your risk of conflict. And then resource dependence, because this plays into poverty. But the more resource dependent a nation is, the more fragile its economy is, the more it's susceptible to the fluctuations of the price of whatever resource they sell, whether it be gold, diamonds, uranium. As that price fluctuates, their currency fluctuates, they don't have a lot of diversification. And so you can see, again, top 10% of Primex means you've got a very diversified economy. It doesn't rely on just one commodity. And then bottom 10%, the circle, means, you know, you've got an economy that almost relies on one thing. Say like Zambia produces a lot of copper. So they're very dependent on copper and the price of copper. And you can see the more, if I said this right, just know this, the more reliant you are on one resource, the more susceptible you are to civil conflict. Okay, and this just shows, this is a map that just shows total export dependence. And if you look, the more red the nation is, the more it is dependent on exports. And look at Africa. So it's not just, I think you need to understand what the environment that produces all these conflicts, and the reason why conflict-related violence in the world is most concentrated in Africa. Even though there's a war going on in Ukraine, even though there's a war going on in Gaza, Africa still topped out the world in the highest number of conflict-related deaths. You don't hear about that. We don't really hear about that. That's not talked about. But these, and I won't say the countries that are involved in this just due to the sensitivity of the nature, because, you know, we want to be able to work throughout Africa, and we're not calling names. Our job is to treat the people that are the victims of this conflict. We're not to name call. We're not to take sides. We just want to help the people that are suffering as a result of this. But you can see what's occurring here is most of Africa is dependent on exports. Their economies are highly reliant on the price of these commodities that they're selling. So, and if you just look at this map over here, what's the export dependence in? Agricultural products in these green nations, energy in the bluer nations, ores and metals in these red nations. So, and this just shows tantalum. What is tantalum? Tantalum is something that is used in your cell phone. And you'll see that the price of tantalum peaked around 2012, 2013 after the Dodd-Frank Act. Similar at the beginning when I showed that clip from blood diamonds, you saw there was a commitment by the industry not to buy conflict diamonds. There's what's called conflict minerals. Conflict minerals are tin, tantalum, tungsten, and gold, which are used primarily in our computers, used in our cell phones. And these are mined, and much of it comes out of the Congo. And much of it is is driven by rebel groups who have mines that they've set up illegally, and then they're selling this on the market to make money. But after the Dodd-Frank Act, which was an act passed in America where we said, we're not going to buy these conflict minerals anymore, you'll see the price, that's when the price of tantalum went the highest, because these rebel groups couldn't sell their conflict minerals anymore on the market. But you can see over time the price dropped, and the thought is they figured out how to outsmart our inspection systems. But it just shows how the price of a commodity can fluctuate. Here's the price of copper. You can see how the price of copper fluctuates. So, and then these are just some models that show what's the probability of war if you add ethno-linguistic fractionalization, polity, and gross domestic product. And basically what this is showing is if you have, the circle is you've got no political representation and you've got poverty, what's your risk of war with your ethno-linguistic fractionalization? You can see it's incredibly high, particularly when you reach the polarization rate. But when you have good political representation, a diversified economy, and poverty levels are minimal, what's your risk of war? Look at this. It's almost zero, right? You really have limited your risk of conflict. Why don't we bring in our panel now? Let's start with Dr. Beza. Dr. Beza, any comments on that in terms of diversifying your economy, resource dependence, poverty, and how these things drive interpersonal violence in your country?
Yes, even if we're like trying to make a progress in our development, many people are still living in a poverty, and there's also a high unemployment rate. You have seen the news when you are in Addis. There is food insecurity, and there's like growing gaps between those who are benefiting from this small development that we have and the large amount of people which are like left behind. And so this will also is creating conflicts and uncivil unrest. And when you talk about this import and exports and this commodity thing, we are like more dependent on agricultural products like coffee, which makes like around third of our export. And we are also it's not like Democratic Republic of Congo, but we have gold, tantalum, and right now lithium is also in play in some of our regions. So these are also creating conflicts between neighboring states, like because these states are, like I said, created based on their ethnic group. So there is conflicts in between states too. So most of our economy is based on exporting these raw materials. Whenever there's a drop in the market, it will affect us like immensely. So this our economy is based on, like I said, agriculture. So whenever there is a drop in the market, there is always a problem in my country. So this is
Dr.
also
Beza, when you say that,
creating.
just to be clear, are you saying like you see it when you go to buy food? I mean, all of a sudden, one day the price of, meat could be, low, and then the next day or next week it's really high. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. That's correct, Dr. Eddings. I mean, especially I've been in the US for the past 1 year, but I came here and see everything is changing and fluctuating like on a daily basis. And the price, the high price is like it's increasing very high. You buy something today for a certain price, then tomorrow or after like 2-3 days when you go and refill those stuff, it's like it's very expensive. Life is getting expensive in my country right now. So yeah, definitely, Dr. Eddings.
Thank you guys for coming. So I want you to get this. So So I'm going to say something, then we'll go back to the panel, but I want you to understand this. When you're understanding the etiology of a particular problem, we use sickle cell anemia as an example and say, where are you going with this? Sickle cell anemia was first described by Linus Pauling. He understood it was a genetic defect. This was described, almost 100 years ago. He described this genetic defect, and he described what caused it. There was this gene defect. This gene defect caused sickling of cells, and then with low oxygen tension, they would come together, polymerize, and you'd get these vaso-occlusive crises, right? And what did we do initially for that, for treatment of it? We did hydroxyurea, we did oxygen therapy to help these people through. And it didn't solve the problem, but we did something. We put a patch on it, right? Now we have gene therapy, but we understood what was driving it. When it comes to something like interpersonal violence or conflict-related violence, what you see here is something that is a huge societal pathology. But there is a Band-Aid we can put on it, and that is we can develop their trauma systems. And through developing their trauma systems, it will help diversify their economy. It will help educate their populace. It will help reach across lines that are, of this ethno-linguistic fractalization. And it can help bring peace. So I just want to say that before you guys head out. If anybody has to leave, feel free to leave. We'll continue on with our panel because some people will be able to stay. Betty, Dr. Abebe, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, let me say something before I leave. Sorry. Because
thank you guys for coming.
War has been in perpetuity, meaning it has run for long. We live in a scarcity mentality, meaning that the cost of everything is gonna get expensive and expensive, and because of the perpetuity of war, cash crops and everything, you can't produce them in abundance. So it's kind of a vicious circle where things are gonna get more expensive and more expensive, and the people who are able to get a job and work would actually also go down. And we have a very young population in Ethiopia, and the number is staggering. Ethiopia has 130 million. If you think about it, maybe 90, 80 million of them are young people below 25, and the prospect of job is non-existent. So they lose their family. There is no job. War is everywhere, and you don't have the capability to grow crops. So it's kind of a vicious cycle that is very difficult to come out of.
Okay, I think that's going to be it. We'll have to close it out. Thanks everyone for coming. And thanks to our panel, Betty. Thank you, Dr. Kinda. Thank you, Dr. Fabrus. Thank you, Dr. Beza. Great to hear from you.
Thank you, Dr. Reddings, for inviting me to be a panelist.
That was wonderful. Wonderful hearing from you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Great presentation.
Hey, thank you. I really enjoyed that. So, thought it was better. We're getting this down.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.